Well, being British, I find it a bit awkward that the first thing you should all know about me is that I have mental health issues. I would much rather we talked about the weather for a bit and got to know each other. But I am here to talk about depression, and it's best to get it out in the open to begin with. I have had some personal experience of this. Please don't hold it against me. I'm being flippant, but I wanted to acknowledge that it is a very difficult subject. And it's hard to admit to brokenness and weakness, even though this is the reality that many of us live with. The statistic that I've heard most often quoted is that 1 in 5 people will experience depression at some point during their life. I think that's probably quite conservative. A recent survey in the UK of 16 to 25-year-olds found that 10% think their life is not worth living. 50% say they have nothing to look forward to. 27% say they often feel depressed. Of those not in work or training, 37% are often depressed, and 27% say life is meaningless. This is a very widespread problem, and as Christians, we're not immune. Well, it's February, we're in Illinois, and this could be seen as a bit depressing in itself. If the statistics I read just now work here, about 400 to 500 people in this room will be feeling grim right now. Others of us in here will have experienced depression in the past and may be feeling okay today. And I'm sure nearly all of us will have seen people close to us struggle with it. By coming here as a poster girl for depression, I'm hoping to achieve 2 things. Firstly, that you will feel that you're not alone. And secondly, that you'll feel empowered to do something about this. There are ways of tackling this illness, and you can get better. In the short time we have together this morning, I'm going to be talking briefly about the origins of depression, its symptoms and diagnosis, its treatment, and lastly, the effect it can have on a person's relationship with God. This quite weighty content is going to be snuck in behind 4 pictures from my life. In this first picture, I'm 8 years old. That's me in the middle with the tragic haircut. See how little pride I have? This is Portugal, mid-1980s, and things, apart from the haircut, are going really well for me at this point. I begin with this image because one of the things I've struggled with the most over the years is a sense of shame that I had nothing dramatic to blame my struggles on. I have a lovely family. They're loving, stable, and God-fearing. And my childhood was really happy. I thought we were poor because I didn't have the right brand of shoes, but according to the standards of the rest of the world, I was really privileged. But this is one of the mysteries of depression. Sometimes it's an obvious reaction to a trauma, a bereavement, a life change, but it's equally likely to have no obvious cause at all. Some people might have a genetic predisposition, others have a temperament that takes them on these crazy emotional journeys. For some people it will be a reaction to a medication or following an illness, and 1 in 10 women will get postnatal depression. Depression can be caused by a huge variety of factors. This second picture, I'm 13. It's my first day at boarding school, which wasn't the best day of my life. I didn't have my depression diagnosed until many years later, but I know now that my first encounter with it began very soon after that photo was taken. I was homesick, lonely, culture-shocked, and miserable, but it went beyond that. My misery took on a life of its own. In those winter months, I was unrecognizable from the girl in that picture. I rarely smiled. I was withdrawn, underconfident, tearful. And inside it was pure chaos. At every opportunity, I would run to the sports centre, not to work out, but because it was the best place I'd found to cry in private. And the smell of old body odour and the damp floor made it suitably horrible. I spent quite a lot of time in there. I thought it could be helpful to run through a list of symptoms that doctors look for when diagnosing depression. There are 9 of them. If you have 5 or more for 2 weeks or longer, then you may have clinical depression. There is a big spectrum here, from the very severe that requires hospitalization and severe therapy, intensive therapy, to a low-grade greyness that you can kick with a bit of help from your friends, as the Beatles put it. We're going to take as our case study no other than the great biblical hero, King David. If you feel bad about anything, he's a good person to think about because God was so obviously crazy about him, and he was so far from perfect. David seems to have gone through fairly major episodes of depression in his life, and he definitely ticked 6 of the 9 boxes. So here are the symptoms of depression as illustrated from the Psalms. Number 1, sleeping more or less than usual. My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. Number 2, a depressed mood. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Number 3, a lack of energy. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. Number 4, feelings of worthlessness or guilt. My guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden too heavy to bear. And number 5, loss of interest or pleasure in daily activities. I am bowed down and brought very low. All day I go about mourning. Number 6, anxiousness, restlessness, or a feeling of being slowed down. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. As well as these, symptoms to look out for include number 7, a change in appetite. Number 8, a loss of concentration and difficulty in making decisions. And number 9, thoughts about death or suicide. So this next picture was taken by the beach in Vancouver, Canada, shortly after I had arrived to study for my master's. What I didn't know then was that I would also be working very hard at tackling my depression. And I got my MRS. I met my husband, Sean, there. They don't get that joke in England, thank you. The author Andrew Solomon writes in The Noonday Demon, by themselves, pills are a weak poison, love a blunt knife, insight a rope that snaps under too much strain. With a lot of them, if you are lucky, you can save the tree from the vine. I know that's a bit of an obscure quote, but I think essentially it's saying there are lots of different ways you can attack depression, and the best chance of success you have is by using all of them at the same time. It's not easy to beat depression, but it is possible. I do believe that. And healing can come from many different sources. I read an article recently with the headline, "Donkeys Cured My Depression." I never considered trying donkeys. You might be wondering how the treatment works. Well, you get to know some sad-looking donkeys in a field near your house, and then eventually you start a sanctuary for the abandoned ones. It was very effective for this lady. See how happy she looks with her donkey friends? Last September, I was speaking at a conference, and a lady came up to me afterwards to tell me she had been miraculously healed after receiving prayer. I was glad for her, and I didn't doubt her story, but I was at the same time quite jealous. When I told you I worked hard at tackling my depression, I really did. I had 3 years of weekly sessions with a psychiatrist. I started taking antidepressant medication, which I am still taking. I developed countless self-help strategies, and I relied very heavily on my friends, family, and my poor new husband. For the sake of honesty, I should tell you that while I'm much, much better, there are still times I have to continue the work because it's something I might always be fighting. So what I want to say is, don't lie down and let yourself be crushed. Fight it. Fight it with therapy, with prayer, with medication, with the support of your community, with discipline, self-help strategies, and exercise. And donkeys, don't forget the donkeys. This last image you will have to imagine. It's of me sitting at the back of church in floods of tears. No one actually took this photograph. It might have been a bit strange if they have. But I have sat at the back of a lot of churches crying. I could be anywhere between the ages of 13 and 30. I've cried in churches at any age between those. My ideal church would hand out tissues with the hymn books at the door, I think. I've been a Christian since I can remember. I prayed an official prayer of commitment when I was 4, but I think my belief went well before that. And since I struggled with depression from 13 onwards, it's definitely shaped and coloured and informed the way my faith has developed. Depression affects your perception of everything, and so it's going to affect your perception of God. As a Christian, there are some very specific issues we face when we get depressed, and one of them is how the illness impacts our relationship with God. There is some good that comes out of this. Isaiah talked about treasures of darkness, but we should be aware of the damage it can do, because then we can be on our guard against distortions of the truth. I'm going to just mention 3 negative things that depression has done to my relationship with God. I know everybody's list will be different, but maybe it will be enough to start us thinking. Firstly, it can cause me to think untrue things about the character of God. When I'm depressed, I think of God as angry, judgmental, distant, unloving, and I'm projecting the feelings I have about my life onto him, assuming that he's disappointed with me, dislikes me, and has abandoned me. All that's actually happened is that my vision is clouded. He is the same God, holy, loving, faithful, and kind. Secondly, it can make me withdraw from my faith community and isolate myself from the people that I need desperately to keep me on track. It takes a lot of courage to go to a church service or a Christian meeting or a meeting of any kind when you're feeling vulnerable. Perhaps you're finding it hard to spend time with anyone, let alone a big group. But this is a time you need your Christian friends and family around you more than ever, to speak truth to you, to pray for you when you can't pray yourself, and to show you God's love through the love of his community. However tempting it might be, don't disconnect yourself. And thirdly, it makes me question whether I am a Christian at all. I feel so worthless, so acutely aware of my many failures, that I'm unable to accept Jesus' grace, acceptance, and forgiveness. When you're in the middle of depression, and if you find yourself thinking any of these things, try not to accept them at face value. Don't reevaluate your beliefs when you have depression, because you're not thinking clearly. Times of depression are not always spiritual deserts, though. If we, like David, can take our darkness and turn it into prayer, desperate, honest, and raw though it might be, we learn a dependence on God that we don't find when we're steady and happy and strong on our feet. More from David here, from Psalm 63. You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and weary land where there's no water. Because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you, your right hand upholds me. There's intimacy and passion and a depth of trust in David's words here that are born out of his suffering and the comfort he's received from the Lord in the midst of it. We too can learn to walk with God in and through emotional darkness, to invite him in and seek his presence in our very worst moments. So may God bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, and sustain us all until we find complete healing in the new heavens and the new earth. Amen.
You're watching WETN, a service of Wheaton College. For information on our programs, call 630-752-5061 or email wetn@wheaton.edu. A video program guide is available at wetn.org.